Hi, welcome everyone. So happy to see you again with so many. For Eileen Myles' very first visit to Brussels. Very short visit, I think less than 24 hours, but...
Less than 24 good hours.
Yeah, I guess so. Welcome. And I'll say some practical things and some information about Eileen. And then we will watch this short film Eileen made called The Trip. It's a short film of 17 minutes, and it's inspired by Jack Kerouac's soundtrack for Pull My Daisy, which is an improvised monologue, I think. And in this film, Myles talks about, politics and daily reality with their childhood puppets. So yeah, that's what we'll do first. But who is Eileen? I mean, I guess, most of you know, but Eileen is a poet and writer who has been writing for more than 40 years. They started writing and living in New York in the late 70s. And as the last member of the New York school, they worked and wrote for a long time in the margins. But since the reissue of Chelsea Girls in 2015, a resurgence of interest in their work has come about. And, they don't only write poetry. I don't know if you all know that. But so they wrote Chelsea Girls, which was written in '94, I think, but only, read now. And but recently they also wrote Afterglow, a dog's memoir. And in this book, Myles lets their dog, Rosie, talk about their relationship. So it's told from the viewpoint of the dog, partly. And I think you can say that throughout Myles' work, dogs and pets play an important role, maybe even one of the most important themes in their work. In evolution, too, there are some dogs here and there. But not only dogs and animals. I mean, I think evolution is also, it seems to be this exploration of the beauty of the everyday. And I feel like Myles' focus is very often on details and very small moments, and it can be the joy of a cup of coffee, but also feeling annoyed about having to set the fonts in Word when writing, for example. And so there are many themes and small moments in evolution. In 1991, Eileen Myles ran for president. And they ran against Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush. With this first openly female campaign, Myles inspired Zoe Leonard's famous I Want a Dyke for President poem. And now, in evolution, Myles included an acceptance speech in which they finally, after 30 years, accept the presidency. And they promise, as a president, to write a poem for the people of the United States every single day. So after Myles' reading, Selma will ask some questions. So Selma Frans is a writer and journalist who recently published a very interesting book that asks us to rethink the role of friendship, that friendships play in our lives, that they very often play an equally important role to romantic relationships, and sometimes, even more important. And keep in mind that after the Q&A with Selma, there will also be time for questions from the audience.
Great. Well, thank you guys for coming. And you'll love the film when we see it. But if it works, if it doesn't work out, you can watch it on YouTube. But it does look better up here like this, I think. So this is my book, Evolution. I'm just going to start. I usually don't do such a normal thing as putting the title poem at the front of the book, but I did do that this time. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Lights on. It's like it's like a Mercury retrograde thing or something. Like technology is like. Here we go. Evolution. Something unearthly about today, so I buy a Diet Coke and a newspaper, a version of me, something about me on the earth and its sneakers, and feeling like the earth's furniture, but that can't be true, or like the Coke and the Times, is true for a little while. I'm not the earth's furniture, not entirely, and I seem to want to go about this in the entirely wrong way. My face asks a man at the deli, "Do you know me?" And he clearly didn't answer. Clearly didn't answer me enough. "I'll get this," I said, picking up the paper, hoping that he might just know me a little bit more, but not enough to make me feel absolutely true. I'm just not true enough, so it's probably the weather, an overripe September, and we're agreeing that the winter will probably be pretty cold. That feels good and true, I thought, talking to Jill, who is my trainer. She shows me what to do, and I feel a little better after that. And I thought, I don't want to be like that poet. I thought, he's just like a prisoner of the planet. And that's what's sad about him. I could say, unlike me, who is like a temporary chair, but I'm actually what's on the chair. I'm using this pen on a purple notebook set up on the angle of my thighs. My thighs. I've had you since I was a kid. I've known you for so long. Even when you betrayed me in the bathtub one night when you were rabbits. But that's because I was going crazy. Is it crazy to be the citizen who's only partially here, like kissing while your eyes anxiously are surveying the room, kissing at a party, but there's nobody there but this person with not so many characteristics, and she will list them so that she can continue writing? That's what I like about this act, the sea of blood and consciousness and barely repressed craziness that's singing in my ears only likes one thing, always like her favorite food. The gulls in my head can do whatever they want, and I can't ever use a wrong word at the right time, and this is it, when the earth only wants me this way, ignoring the seagulls and writing. I could stop here, because the Coke is so good, I want to go further, longer. Where should I go? My foot scrapes against a book, wondering. Today I discovered that to talk about certain things makes me sad, so I'll stop. There. My arm rests on a pillow, and that feels pretty good. I cherish this time alone. When I go out, I think, why am I here? I'd like to change the very characters I'm writing in. If I could stop thinking about if you know me, what else could I do? I could go to the movies, but afterwards it would be like me talking about what was so obviously wrong. And now I'm picking the wrong words, and so I've gone on too long, and the gulls came back, and the truck's outside. I know the loneliness of love and the loneliness of being outside and looking out the window when love is gone. But this face that turns and listens in my home and wonders if you know me is lost and will never be found. And something new starts up in my building, a different sound. I know, you were like, should I? Now you don't even have to. No need. No. This one's called The City. I wrote this like totally at the moment of Occupy, which was kind of a really beautiful moment in New York. And I had a new dog who is like orange colored, so she was always running through my poems. The dog that you saw. She was new. The city is juicy and bloody at night, stabbing my eyes. An orange dog walking through a town of dead leaves, or the green stripe of chicken smell, off, on. Occupy invented the city at night. All its empty wares are everywhere now. Now is a wide cement path. I love when she performs that orange stripe madly again and again in the house. She likes inside her cage and she likes out. Where is water everywhere when the bottom drops out? Oh, mammal, you are my love. My loneliness, an illustrious path, a screen. I shoot these themes. I mean my jism. That look on your face is covered with my thought. I might stop for a long while. Then again, I may not. This is the big machine and we are in it. Occupy ruined everything. The city is gone. The meat trucks cry. In this chalice, in this cherished empty bell, capitalism gnawing on its bone, its bloody, blazing, empty bone, its horny plastic bone and no one's home. I scrawl on your wall your how many mill buildings paid for with skulls. The girls who were stolen and married, spent. The boys who were burned, they are living in your rooms. Your clothes, asshole, are theirs. It's really quiet. It's like, I get really paranoid. I think I'm reading the wrong poems. But perhaps you're listening, which is very nice. This one's called Transmission. And there was this German book about trees that I read, and it was kind of awesome because it really explained how trees are like a family, like genuine forests have these relationships, and trees can only grow to a certain extent, and then they're stunted basically by their mothers. And then when the mother falls, the tree can grow. It's great. Transmission. I'm overcome by the cruelty of nature. No, I mean, I'm with it. And each little capacity it has can't be transferred. I mean, a spruce can't give its oils to you, can it? But that's how it grows in the absence of technology. My thoughts grow. My thoughts grow among trees. But I don't help them, though I'm for them. I'm for my dog, and incidentally, I feed her, but I don't see her much. Joe does. Joe is my friend and also a dog father. I don't help mountains. Mountains help me. I know the planet is old and splashy. Sleep helps me. Time helps me. My mother helped me, and now she is gone. She also hurt me, so it's good that she's gone. I can grow different in the day or 3 decades in which I've got left. I can grow towards the mountains, sit in solidarity with prisoners, or go to jail. I'm not joking. I can push different. I want to say something about my cunt, because that's what you ask. But I am alone. No mother, no phone, just a notebook and a cunt in my thoughts. I don't even think my thoughts. You do. Okay, this one. This one's called BP. You can actually tell how old a poem is by the technology. You'll see what I mean. But there's also like typographical technology. So I don't really use colons that much, but in this poem I use colons. And so but I want you to know when I'm using colons. So when I go like that, I mean colon. So, okay, BP. If I set my BlackBerry at normal, this is an old poem. It's about 10 years old. If I set my BlackBerry at normal, what will I get besides a paler icon on its screen that's silent? And that seems weird. Who taught their students to never say weird? I'd be speechless so much of the time. In fact, weird is the mitten I keep my normal in. So there. The bottom line's got to be class. I write in this now, hardly able to remember the word that means she writes like she sounds. I like the breath of a stretch. You read that, hear me go, oh. Otherwise, it's just all smeared out there for you to reject. I'm a little sad, and we all agreed, a room of us, that it was important to say, I'm feeling it now. Are you? The tiniest rectangle of trees under bamboo, thank God, gets me out of this impossible tilt on the medium of why don't I tell him what I'm working on now? Novel. My novel's skinny. I have a movie to watch, so I don't have to do this. I can express even less commitment. My girlfriend sends me a picture in which she looks melancholy and I a self-hating fool. Giddy. Is it reduced to colon? It's almost like I'm grabbing your attention by its 2 tits and going, dig this. Thank you. Okay, there was like the political, like in 2016 when Trump was elected, it was suddenly like, I mean, you know, obviously it hasn't ceased, but it was like, we're having a political moment now. So I would, as a poet, I would get these requests for like, do you have anything, a political poem? And I was like, And I would just sort of sneer, and then I would turn my head slightly, and I would have a political poem. So this is one of those. And it gets weirder because Rebecca Solnit's in it. And then I met her, and anyway, it was very strange. I said, I wrote a poem with you that you're in. And she goes, I know. I was like, who's big personality, Rebecca Solnit? And I was like, so it's called The Vow. Oh, and it's actually, did you watch Man in the High Castle, that show? Which was about Nazis, you know? And it was like, when it first came out, I was like, who would want to watch a show about Nazis? And then later, you know, when Trump was president, people were like, no, it's about resistance. And I was like, oh, so that's what's in here. The Vow. Everything's like a shade of brightness and dark, like this new pad I got, or my computer, or these doorways opening one to the next, which is where I began. Nothing is like my dog eating an apple core in bed. The sleeping bag is red, it's March, and it's already warm. I don't want you stepping on my computer, which is where all my friends are, some of whom are Nazis. I never thought I'd call Nazis friends, but I spend at least an hour a night with these ones, and then I wake up and read about the real ones on Twitter. For days, Rebecca Solnit and I struggled to be Facebook friends. It was like we were going to the gym together. We worked it out. I was visiting her today, looking at her face. The heat just rumbled. It's not even evening, but I thought I'd get a little Nazi in early. I would die for my country if that included everything, my friends and my dogs and all the lakes and ponds. I'm ready for the struggle. And this is actually literally another, people like, do you have a political poem? I was just like, come on. I was like, yes. So this one's called Creep. Ugly nightmare, eating too much, dunking your head in water over and over again. Feel bad for your kid, all of them, but most of all us. Bad nights when I was young and drinking, predatory men with swollen heads would buy me drinks and want to fuck me again and again because I was nothing to them, and he is our president now. Now I want to read you the very best poems in this book. Okay, this is the absolute best poem. This is amazing. I feel proud of this one. It's called The Baby. And I just read it in Berlin, where it was called Das Baby. I was like, I have to change the title of this poem. This is great. Das Baby. You know? It was like a band that we need. Where's Das Baby? I was like, if the film doesn't work out, Das Baby is going to play. The baby says to the old man, let's have a cup of coffee. The old man says, now you're talking. All right. Thank you. Okay. This one, I know. I can't top that. I'm sort of screwed now. Okay, this is called A Gift for You. And actually the story about this one is that it was translated into Spanish. And the women who translated it were like, great. They were like, we got the dick joke. And I was like, what dick joke? And it turns out there's a Boston poet, really great queer Boston poet named John Wieners from the 50s and 60s, and his work is amazing. And so when they saw John Wieners, they thought his name was Joe Dick. And they translated it. I was like, no, that's his name, you know? So, and the other thing about this poem is that David Wojnarowicz, you know David Wojnarowicz, there's a big biography of him that I have not yet read. And I do that thing that bookstores do, which is when I don't read a book, I turn it out on my bookshelf and I just leave it there for months and years until I read it, or I just grow ashamed and put it back in the shelf. But the cover of David's book, he's smoking a cigarette, so that's in the front of the poem. So this is called A Gift for You. Around 5:30 is a peaceful time. You can just hear the dog lapping. David lifts his smoke to his lips forever, dangling chain in the middle of everything about the top shelf or so. The party at which I said, that's my collected works, and everyone stared. My home was so small. Is it? I'm not particularly into the task of humility at the moment, but I'm not against it. It's like that deflated beach ball on a tiny chair I think of as joking with the larger one on a painting floating in air. My home is large. Love made it large once, not to get all John Wieners. And believe me, love made it small once. This place only had sex, unlike the house. I love a house. I fear a house. A house never gets laid. Frankly, who doesn't like a hotel room? I live in a hotel room, a personal one. A young person very much like me was brutal. No personal photographs, please. It was anyone's home, perfect for a party. Now I'm going fast. How the description of a drug enters a room and changes the room. Thus, with going fast, say thus if you want to go slow. To drink the wrong thing for a moment, for you to lick my thigh in your honey face. I met a dog named Izzy once. I met a dog named Alan, the calm person writing her calm poems. Now and then she shows her sacred heart. She opens her chest and a monkey god is taking a shit, swinging on his thing. You didn't know I had so much inside me. Buckets of malice, Bibles of peace. I don't want to go all library on you now like my mother, the mother of God, or my brother named Jack who sat in a deck of cards getting hard. When she squeezes in getting cozy, I know less what I want to say. I can open an entire room comes out each moment. That's what I mean, not things widen and flow. There's no purpose to this. Like, and this one's called Dissolution. Okay. I don't know why I want to tell you that I wrote this at an artist colony, but sort of. And I have now had a couple of poems in the New Yorker, but it's sort of like, it's like a joke in America with poetry. You just like, everybody writes, you write your first poem and you mail it to the New Yorker and it gets rejected, and that just goes on for decades. And then it becomes, for a long time their poems were all about anxiety and sailboats. And so every time I'd be like writing a beautiful poem and then I would say fuck, and then I would think, well, this is clearly not going to go into the New Yorker. But weirdly, the first poem they published of mine, it says shit. And I was like, how could this be? Oh, this is that poem. Dissolution. Sometimes I forget what country I'm in. I could write poems in bed. I think, have some Americans look at your awful movie to tell you when you're wrong and just racist. I got this bug bite that could be anything. Got no new information to send across. I'm willing to embrace new sort of crayon-y tone, scribbled version of empty, so it's kind of full. A kid could draw this world it had been lived in so long. You forgot to call your family, and now you're ready to write an explicit Bible of love. The ripple of experience is the only beauty here. My coloring book, why not, is so like a movie. And I just hand you this damp coloring book. I say, there. That's my model. Not the kind of laminate shit you can bring in the tub. I'm not making some picture book. Can you believe I can't believe they published this. Not this kind of laminate shit you can bring in the tub. I'm not making some picture book of bourgeois life. A damp coloring book is naturally orange. You left it outside. Now you want to save it. It's still good. And that's your secret. How did a mosquito get under these sheets, knocking against my calf? They stop when I stop thinking about them. The book that was my very private thing is gone. Do you think, are we ready to talk, or should I read another poem? What do you feel? What are we feeling? Timing, we don't. I know, I'm putting some, huh? Yeah? We should try the film? Okay, I gotta read a long, an end poem so that we can say that's the last poem. Okay, hold on. But it won't be a long one. It's a beautiful long poem, but I won't read it. I'll read it. That was amazing. That was an amazing example of manipulation from the stage. Okay. Okay, it's called Sweetheart. It's gonna take exactly 7 minutes. I think you won't be sorry. Okay, Fresca. Do you know Fresca? Fresca's back, I think. Okay. When I was in high school, Fresca was big, and when I started to drink, I would pour gin into my Fresca. But Fresca's got a new look, but I'm not drinking that. My Coke struck the ice, and the ice cube cracked. I'm sitting by a little Buddha who is sitting in my yard. I imagined you walking in, gasping at the same couch, the same bed. It's almost the same town, but this is what I meant, and there's so much pleasure, difference in this, that. I meant to be here. One sleeps on what they mean and arises on the decided side, and that's the hope. An entire room is opened by particular feelings that say you're on the edge of the space, and then you wait to watch it grow. Grow like a love or a feeling of distrust, or a body grateful for sun and breeze and the rising and falling of my dog's chest. No, gut. The little Buddha's smiling southeast, I figured that out. Their genitals are unknown. In fact, they're everything smiling, walked on by ants, planted in the dirt but not dead, activated by my gaze. Their smiling makes me glad. Dog turns Buddha's way. I go forward with confidence. I may turn nothing up but this gentle scratching in my yard before making a call, opening the self somehow so it's possible to have a friend to call, not only from need but interest in their life, the body I'm pouring into, joyous to be connected to someone, well, covered by ants, surrounded by breeze, actually touched by birds, their sound, then landing. There's nothing romantic in their absence. The bird is all touch, no matter how distant their flight. The sky is open. My gaze is wide. It matters how they dive and hover. The silly cluck, the ninny, constant. The hoot makes the gray sky blue. Trees, brown slanting trees. The woman dying in her face thought, am I recording? But it was the young man counting everything. Cora Crete, whose art I liked so much last weekend in Sydney, performed Bird in the Dying Woman's Sky, so his quote was reverential. That she could be copying anything by dying was more about him. A mustache on the sound that life's made of. I think you don't miss me enough, or you regard me as seasons that simply come, and it's true, I'm everything. I used to love so much to show you my poems, but everything's not enough. You have to go out and shake everything's hand, and the tremendous feeling of everything is not shook enough. I'm sick of being God for you. I'm not the fresca or the Buddha or the bird. I'm the ice that cracks. I'm really feeling it now. The amazing difference of contact, everything's gasp. It begins so slow. Hours of freezing, waiting, a life, and the draining of it by waiting too long. Riding around in a car. I'm not any Coke, I'm every Coke. And a bird likes the sound of that. To be so close, the earth parts for its own arrival. The time of day is enchanted by my jeans on the line. I'm enchanted by everything too. How could I be it and feel it? Drawing sun lines, sticks. If I say two again and I'm creating a pattern, someone who doesn't love me will say, you say two too much. I suppose going blind is momentarily seeing colors in everything and remembering them for the rest of your life. I'm afraid to tell you I'm going blind. What I'm saying is I'm retiring from God. I will feel my genius quietly, the furrows of a dead tree accepting my love. You start like a car and pepper in a number of growls. That's dog. You roll and you're bird, and Buddha's difficult now, more of an aside. That something so different as the sun could turn, I think, and we're turning on our dirty little urn. There's a movie about everything. Am I getting this part of that? Endlessly obliged to be wise. Upstairs, 16 little eggs turn in another galaxy, someone else's sandwich. Today, I was so busy I didn't even see lunch. I had it, but I didn't see it at all. The distant eggs are turning for someone else. I poured Fresca into my glass, and then I poured my vodka, and then I got drunk. Darker day now when my throat fills and Buddha's awake. A bee wants to sting me, and in that moment I would notice everything. Why do you think I'm sweet? Why must I die? Thank you. So now we're going to talk. Oh, we're going to watch the movie. Okay, that's good. No, let's keep it going. Title, yeah, right here. Should we say by Eileen Myles? I'm embarrassed by that. Is that what people do? You guys are being awfully quiet. Are you going to be dour? That is not my best side. There you are. Yay! Yay! That's pretty much it. Lots of shaking and hair tossing. That's Montgomery on the left, the young guy. Casper, Bedelia, the diva. Oscar, the man of the house. Kind of my dad. We did it, you guys. We got you all out. You're in the West. Okay, this is Marfa. We're pretty much leaving town. Everybody's feeling pretty great. Honey sees another dog. Look who just woke. Presenting Crocky. And I start giving him shit about the local jail. Pool of silence.
You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bale, get a little drunk, and you land in jail.
Why am I making the incarceration joke? Alcoholism is a disease, even among puppets. He even lost a tooth on this trip. Montgomery's having a very slow gay revelation. Very gay, very, very gay. He sees this cowboy. He gets them all to go, moi, moi. These guys are all kind of zombies. I try to distract him, but he just can't stop. I'm sure it was hard to spend your youth in a puppet box. It was the picnic basket, Eileen. It was like we were lunch. Stupidly, I start teasing, telling Bedelia I can get her interviewed on the radio station. She starts singing. Okay, guys, we are leaving town. We're going to Alpine. Much bigger road. Do you like it? Do you like it? What's that? That's a mountain. That stripe in front of it, you're gonna die. Are we dead? Are we dead? Are we dead? This is incredible. I don't even have language for these things. A tumbleweed isn't one kind of bush. It's anything that tumbles. That big white thing that looks like a bird, that's a cloud. We remember clouds. That's a train. What's the number? Can I see the number? Remember those plays we used to do when we were kids? You're still kids. No, we're not. We're old. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Old, old, old. What's that box in the train? What box? That square thing. It's like a hole? I don't know, I guess it's like a hole. I love that. Can we take a picture? This is a picture. I had a dream once about my father after he was dead. He came back and his head was bloated and misshapen. He was in such pain, but he was dead. Eileen, we were in a picnic basket for 60 years. What are you talking about? Want to hear some music? That big stripey thing? That's a cloud. Shut up. But what is going on with my darling? Oscar, you're generally so buoyant and in charge. What the fuck, dear? I'm overcome. I've never seen anything like it. I'm simply speechless. That's incredible. That's just incredible. That's a good hug. He's a man, but he looks like a little kid. Even the mountains look young. What could it have been like to live in a picnic basket for 60 years? And to have a relationship inside that? Ooh, ooh. Yes, Casper? I do realize I am a ghost, but I have done some research on the internet. Ooh, ooh. And have discovered a university in Alpine. That's where we're going. Yes, I know that. And I should like to study philosophy. All the puppets laugh. You're all being cruel. Casper? Casper. Yes. How did you come to that? I think about what I am and how I am all the time. The many years in the dark in the basket, I thought about many things. But most of all, existence. From the weave of the basket to the tremble of my family and the world outside I knew to exist. Practical sensations gone atmospheric, then vernacular. Do you know what I mean by that? Yes, born a puppet, born a slave. Then Bedelia starts pushing him, then screaming, "Ah!" It's nothing, Mother. We're going under a trestle. We're heading into the town. There's Sol Ross for you, Casper. Why is everything about Casper suddenly? Squeaky wheel, kids. Eek! 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 I would like a little oil. Oh my God! Oh my God!
He just keeps rolling along.
It's summer here. All the beautiful buildings. Nice parking lot. Yay! Basket darkness, day or night, indoor or out, it's all the same with you. Years with us, time with us. Everything is love. Indeed. Indeed. I probably need to think about getting some pencils and a computer and forming an application. Would you write me a recommendation, Eileen? Indeed. Indeed. Maybe I have some options here. A small stipend to begin a life specific to me in an urban setting in a community. I'll talk to Oscar. Can we wrap up a little bit? I think it was a great trip. I think you saw your first train, a Western train. I think you heard it. Okay, we saw the shit-ass aesthetic beauty of Marfa, battered and growing. And everyone saw Oscar experience the sublime. What was it like, Oscar? I have not come back, truly. We've taken lots of trips. I mean, we will take them to Madagascar and Saskatchewan. I went to Buenos Aires in the fall, and I would like to take you there. And I would like to introduce you to Cesar Ira. Would you like that? He's a very great author. But Delia, honey, I didn't make you. I feel I was made to make you. Montgomery, we share a sexuality, believe it or not. We can talk about that later. We have time, and we have a future. We have space and light. We can see the moon and the day today. Yeah, it's up there now. And we can even go there. And you know why? Because we're family. This is not the end of the story, oh no. I may begin my life as a college student approximately 88 miles from the US-Mexico border here on the white steps of Sul Ross University, named after a Confederate general. Here, if they accept me, I may study thought and meaning and study itself. I may study plankton and clouds, mountains, cell phones and ghosts, but I am a ghost, born in Eileen's child hands, head of paper mache, a gown fashioned of soft cloth that Emma found. In a way, a puppet, a ghost, truth be told, is a zombie, the undead. Never born, never dying, never arriving. I make common cause now with the slaves of the world, prisoners of our security state, and most abundantly, most locally today, America's prisoners of war, not immigrants, illegals, aliens, but refugees, children, women, and men in cages and jails not far from here. A multitude, less visible than a ghost, more silent than a puppet. They are not criminals. These people brayed about by politicians, held away from friendship, pleasure, health, and safety, in the dark, but refugees in a never-ending war this country wages against the poor and vulnerable, victims, descendants, recipients of our endless interventions. In Latin America, our wars, worldwide, and in our jails, detained at our borders,
helped by our friend Israel, exporting their security craft around the world. Abolish all of it. The borders and the jails and the police state. Open the door. R.I.P. Not rest in peace, but abolish the racist, imperialist patriarchy. Abolish it. Abolish it. Abolish it. Abolish it. Abolish it. Abolish it. Now.
We do it? We wired? Yeah. Hello, Selma.
Hello.
Am I on? Yes.
Are we on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the trip. Can you tell us a bit more about the cast? 'Cause there's you, and then there is your dog.
There is my dog. There is the puppets I made them when I was 9 at a after-school program, and I've in a life in which I've lost so much of my stuff from the past. Somehow these puppets have survived, and so they appear in Afterglow. There's a chapter because I was writing about a dog, and I didn't want the dog to speak, but I figured if the dog had the proper opportunity to speak, the dog would speak. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a chapter called The Puppets Talk Show, and I made there be a talk show that they invited the dog onto. And then the dog spoke, because what else would the dog do on the talk show? So the puppets have been sort of moving into the foreground of my work. And then I think when I lived part of the time in Texas, and this filmmaker friend just said, the way we all say to each other, we should do something sometime. And I was like, sure. But then there was a beautiful, Marfa is like, a little art town, but it has no services. And 25 miles away, there's the real Texan town, Alpine, which is more conservative, but they have a drugstore and they have a supermarket and so on. And so, but the drive, it's a 25-mile drive, and it's gorgeous. It's just mountains, and it's just kind of awesome. And so I suddenly thought, what if I brought the puppets on that road trip? And I just figured out afterwards what the plot was, but
Right, so you went driving, and then you wrote the story later.
Well, no, I actually, we staged, we had to find money, and we got a second truck, and we organized the shoot. But I think the night before, I started to have some ideas about what it could be about.
Right, yeah.
And then I wrote that, and we dubbed in the dialogue later on.
Later on, yeah. And you already mentioned it. This is not the first time that you've written dog dialogue. You've also done that in Afterglow, where the dog speaks.
Yeah.
And the dog is often kind of a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of commenting on what's happening. So I'm wondering what happens when you're writing dog dialogue? Does a dog bring out other things? Does it help you express certain things?
I mean, I think dogs are sort of unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to say. I mean, it is kind of an absurd thing, but I think that all of us who live with animals are in dialogue with them in this way.
Right, yeah.
And it's often very unconscious, and so when you kind of create an opportunity for them to speak directly, I think all sorts of things kind of come flooding up, and so they are kind of a different part of the brain and a different part of writing, and I think weirdly in that book I just felt like I started channeling all sorts of crazy shit, but one of them, once my dog was speaking, anything in the universe could speak, and that was sort of a wonderful feeling.
That's a great starting point. Yeah. then there's some political commentary at the end about the prisons, the borders. How did that come about?
Well, you can't make it, you can't live in that part of the world. Like all the news that's been in the States, like Tornillo, all these places are right there. Like to get to Marfa, you fly into El Paso and you are right where families and kids and people are just, so it's just like there's a lot of activism in the area. The border is only an hour and a half away. So it's very hard to do anything light, it's just, or it's not real to be making art without acknowledging where we are. And I think, and I recently met the writer Valeria Luiselli, and that amazing book, 40 Questions, I had just read too. And so I had a lot of very cogently put information about the border. And then actually I showed it to her because I thought, is this okay or is this fucked up? And I showed, she was like, no, I think it's, so I felt, at least from her perspective, it was not, I was not merely being a ridiculous person aspiring to the political.
Yeah, you also mentioned before that in evolution there are that politics is also a theme, especially of course in acceptance speech. As Tessel also already kind of explained, that's your response to Zoe Leonard, who was responding to you, and so you're accepting the presidency. And I mean, it's a wonderful essay. You should definitely read it, where you say, well, I'm a president now, and I'm going to write you a poem a day, and weapons are going to be banned to museums, food is going to be free, education is going to be free. And for me, when I read that essay, it's, I'm not, I guess like many people, I'm not very positive about this particular political moment, but when I read this essay, I feel like it invites me to some sort of utopian thinking, and I kind of feel like, well, I would vote for this person, why don't we have this president? So I'm wondering what was kind of the space you were in when you wrote it, and what your idea was with writing that. Is that kind of the feeling you want to evoke?
I mean, well, I think in the situation, again, because I'm like a citizen, not a politician or a presidential candidate or a corporate CEO, so relative to who one could be in America at this point in time, I don't technically have any power at all, or of that conventional sort. So in a way, it was like letting a dog talk, to say, okay, Eileen, what would you do with America? But I think that the thing that's interesting, and I've thought this about work and art at this time, it's like, it seems so natural to make dystopias at this moment, and it seems so not natural to make a utopia. And so I felt like stepping into that space was both playful and empowering. And truly, I think the thing we know about art is every time you enact a piece of art publicly or socially, it's an invitation to enter that space momentarily, And I think that that's something very real. I mean, like the phrase that people used to use a lot a while ago, preaching to the choir, I think has really changed now, because I think we're starting to understand the choir must sing. It's sort of like we don't have a way of knowing who we are or what our collectivity feels like or means unless we find ways to preach to the choir and be the choir and chant and encant and become one in a way. And so I think for me, like writing the piece was really fun. But though I wrote the piece several days before the election, so I wrote it at a moment where I really did believe that, we thought Hillary Clinton, which would have been a complicated presidency, but I still was very much for her. We thought we were very excited about our first female president coming on board, and so there was a real different feeling the day I delivered it, and all the artists who were present that day gave pieces that suggested we were in a new moment.
Right,
and we just are in a new moment that we hadn't expected.
Right, yeah. And then when Evolution came out, did it feel natural to put it in there? Because Evolution that's a collection of your work from the last 11 years, right? So how did you make that selection? Because, acceptance speech is an essay, it's not a poem.
Right.
So why did you decide to put different formats in Evolution, and how did you pick the poems?
Well, part of it is that if you write in a lot of forms, then do you keep them separate? You know, it's sort of like always if you write poetry and nonfiction, and people, you know, like one often is asked, so what is that like to write in different forms? And I think lots of us write in different forms, but I think the next step is to mess them up and put them together more, and even I mean how we consume art and how we present art to have more often. You know, it's like so often it's like two writers as opposed to. And I'm not referencing my own film, but and as opposed to like having a musician and a writer and I mean, I just think that it like in all ways, I think we need to mix things up. And so, I mean, even I've written, you know, I've often put essays in poetry books, but I mean, this sounds so crazy, but I've never put in two. Like two is more complicated than having one essay in there. One can be like a forward or an afterword or a way that you divide the book, but putting in two felt truly kind of fucked up. I was like, how will, you know, and putting one right up front that is not poetry. And I just feel like I just have to take those risks, you know, with my work because, also because I know that my work is read that way too. So why not put it in the same, you know, like it just, you know, even you know, putting a photograph that I took on Instagram on the cover of the book made me just think that I was trying to like loosen up what a book is too, you know, which I think all the ways that we can kind of like make things. I mean, I have a friend of mine just died recently, a fiction writer named Kevin Killian, and he was from the Bay Area, and he was part of a group of writers who called themselves New Narrative. And one of the things they did, which I do, is in their prose and in their novels, they use their own names, you know, and it freaks people out. I was like, how can you use your own? That's not a novel, that's nonfiction. Right, yeah. You know, because somehow the rule is that your name is on the outside of the book, but not on the inside of the book, you know, and I just think those are more of the thing. And I think the reason, when Kevin talked about that, he said the reason he did it was to make the book open to the world, you know, and so I think all the ways that we do that to tear things open is much more reflective of the way we live and how we live. Right, and then how, to me... And literature is conservative, just inherent. Yes. It's really intense. You know this, you're a writer. I mean, yes, yeah, I think we've had this conversation before where you said, well, literature is far more conservative than film or series or... Visual art, anything. Right, yeah. And so, do you notice that when you're trying new things in the publishing world? Oh, sure. I mean, it's just like even publishing my dog book, I think that like, since it wasn't a sentimental dog book and it was a weird dog book, it actually wasn't easy to publish. I thought, oh, I've had all this attention lately. I'm like, I'm ready, you know, be the big guy and get a lot of money and shoot my dog book. And it was like the publisher I had at the time, who was my first corporate publisher, they were like, no, thank you. You know, this doesn't really resonate with us, you know, because what are you, you know? Yeah, yeah. But actually, when I think about it now, like the dog book, Afterglow, that's often the first thing that's mentioned about you, right? I mean, when I read a bio, then it's often about, you know, Afterglow is one of the first books that journalists mention. So there's something there, right? I mean... But see, it sort of comes after. I think publishers are really the gatekeepers. Right. You know? Well, I'm glad you got Afterglow, you know, out into the world. But let's go back to evolution. So it's poems and essays from the last 11 years. How did you choose which ones you were going to put in there? Well, I feel like because there's a way in which the book chooses itself, because I think one of the things that's really funny about poems is you could write a poem and you're like, this goes in my book, and you just can't find the place where it goes in the book, and it just turns out it just doesn't go in that book. Like you can't force, I mean, if you believe that a book of poems is anything organic at all, and I really do, then it's about the reading experience, and it's about a certain kind of aesthetic experience and a flow, and it's just like poems. So even poems in there that I just couldn't stick into an earlier book because they just couldn't find a home there, you know. So it's sort of like they just sort of take time to have like relationships and poem community and all that, you know. But and the order is just maddening trying to make it, because it's like you don't think that anybody really sits down and writes and reads your whole book of poetry front to back, but you still pretend they read that way, you know. And so that pretense is sort of like is you know is not an easy road in a way. But I try and think of them like films. Like I love films, and I love how we just all know how to read films and the consciousness of a film. It's sort of like the rhythm will keep changing, and I think you kind of have to do that in a book of poems.
You definitely do that in evolution, where we have these longer poems, often about quite serious topics, and then there's something like the baby or the one about the flowers, which I love. Those are kind of like short. They're almost like a good joke, They're like punchy and. So I'm curious, what do you like about that format, about the shorter ones?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like, I often write short poems, and they feel that, well, they do feel like jokes. They just do feel like, and it's so like, I think it didn't, Twitter didn't create it, but I think it's very funny that you get to send short poems out into the world now in a much more rapid way. But I just think it's just sexy when you're looking through a book to waste paper.
Really?
You know what I mean? It's sort of like, and I think part of the reason I like poems is they seem weird. Like you were learning to read, and you were like, you have these books, and there would be like big pictures and like giant fonts, and it didn't fill that, and then and then the picture started to get littler and littler, and the font started getting smaller and smaller, and it's just like, and then suddenly it was like completely machinic, and every page of prose went from like the West Coast to the East Coast page, and the page was full, and there was no white space. And poetry was always that thing that like fooled around with the white space, and it just like, you knew that it was like play. When you first started to read, you thought like, what's that? And it was like poems and songs look different on the page, So I just feel like when you're looking through a book of poetry, and also I think I heard a book designer say this once, that just books full of pictures, you need a resting page, which means full, like, ting, like book designers know that. So we're like designers, I think, when we make books of poetry.
I worked for a magazine where we tried to make an ad-free magazine, and then we realized that the ad is kind of that resting point. The ad also serves that purpose a little bit, because the ad, you look at it, and then so that makes total sense. So it's also kind of the aesthetic experience of that shorter poem.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it might also be about the reading experience, because when you're putting those poems in the book, you're going to have to read them at events. So I'm guessing that's also part of the process.
Well, they fit in the books in the same way the poem fits in the reading. Like you're reading a long poem, and then you read a 4-line poem, and you stop. You go da da da, and then there's just like this surprise silence in the room, and it's sort of like it's fun. Like I just saw Chantal Ackerman film, and I don't speak French, and it didn't have subtitles. And it was so interesting that there were jokes. The audience was laughing away, and I'm like, sitting there. But there were jokes that were silent, too. There was so much of the comedy of the film and its timing was moments where people move through rooms and they look at each other, and you're like, oh, I got that. And I think that like less really works the silence in a book or in a reading.
Another thing you like to play with is punctuation. And you've been doing that from the start of your career. Why was that?
Gertrude Stein told me to do it, I was like, I read, like when I lived in Boston before I moved to New York, and there was like in Harvard Square, there was this one used bookstore. And I just was like, whatever I found there, I was like in high school, and then during college too, I would like, whatever I found there, I would buy, and there was a cool guy that worked there. And I remember picking up the Lectures in America, where she just tells you what everything is. She explains poetry, she explains prose. She says, why would you put a question mark at the end of the sentence if it doesn't have a question in the sentence? What good is that sentence? You should already know the question. You don't go, question.
Right, so you need the question mark, the sentence is not strong enough.
Exactly. Yeah. And she was like commas, and she really, she was so enacting a voice. I guess it was a voice print, more or less. It was a recording of talks that she actually gave in America. But you could feel that, like the hesitation and the repetition and the pauses. And it was such a beautiful act of poetry. And so and she also said that the language was changed by the underclass. Right. She goes, like the top of the culture, the upper class never changes the language. It's always the people, the vernacular. And so I felt very empowered by that, because I had lots of class issues about being a writer and whether I was entitled to be a writer and whether I spoke the correct English and so on. And so I think I felt like my boat got a little shove from Gertrude Stein right at the beginning of my writing. Before I even had the nerve to call myself a writer, I felt like I got permission.
So it was, in a way, maybe kind of a way for you to not hide your class identity, but actually highlight and express it.
To consider it a kind of power.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm one of the people who are changing the language. I'm starting this right now, you know?
And you're still, doing that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get away with it more now, I think.
Is that is that so? I mean, is that because that's another thing I wanted to ask when whenever I read your bio introduction somewhere, then journalists always say, well, Eileen Myles came from the margins and has been there for a long time and is now in the center and has been this boom since Chelsea Girls. Is that how you experience it?
I mean, I guess it's different when more people know you or more people act as if they've, so it's, yeah, I mean, I suppose it feels different, but it doesn't feel different to me, if you know what I mean. I'm not sure. What do I mean? Yeah. What was that question again?
So yeah, like journalists kind of looking from the outside in, they will say like, oh,
Well, okay, I know. I mean, the thing is, it's sort of like inside. Like poetry comes out of a community always.
Yeah.
So you're always famous it's like famous in your family, famous in your neighborhood, famous in your poetry community, famous among dykes, famous among So it's sort of like I think, I mean, like it's even like I was someplace the other night and we were talking about writing and somebody asked the question of it was myself and a few other writers and they were like, when did you know that you were a writer? When did you know you would really, And I just thought that seemed like an irrelevant question to me because I think as soon as I got to New York, I found myself in a poetry community. Like that was the first thing I did. I took workshops. I was in reading. We gave open readings and group readings, and it was sort of like I was in a community of writers. So it wasn't a question of defending the fact that I was a writer to anybody. It's just like that's who we were and what we did. And so I think when you get more attention, it's a little weird because somebody actually might recognize you in a way that only other poets would recognize me before, So it's like the scale is a little bit different, but basically I was always at home in my world, writing my work and felt known and mostly stayed in a world to some extent where I was known. I mean, that made it safe and comfortable and was my support network.
Right. So I guess it's mostly different for the outside and you're still just doing your thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it also maybe does open some doors. Like when you want to put the Instagram picture on the cover of your book.
They let me do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I get less hard-ass edits on. They were like, you can't do that. But now that happens less frequently, or if I pitch an article to somebody, they seem more interested than before. So that's nice.
That's very nice.
Yeah. I'm not broke. I guess maybe that's the nicest thing. I'm not completely poor.
And we mentioned Instagram. Instagram and Twitter, you're great at both of them. How did that happen? How did you become so good at social media?
Well, I just think it's fun, right? It's totally like I always like taking pictures, and the thing that's and I never would have any context to show them, and so I think it just like Instagram just felt very fluid that you could actually, and also I think it's again I think poetry is a visual art. It always was. And so you're writing a poem, but you're seeing something. It's just that you're either like the poem is a reaction shot to something you're seeing, or you're literally saying what you're seeing. So it's sort of like there's this visual, and so you're captioning. I mean, I often think when you're writing a poem, you're captioning things you see, then you show what you see. So it's always coming forward and backwards with the visual field or the verbal one. They're always exchanging places and sort of. And so I think that these forms like Twitter and Instagram seem entirely poetic to me. And I think it's.
Sorry, yeah, and that helps you, I guess, also reach a different audience.
Well, it's funny. It's always funny when somebody says, "I didn't know your work, but I found it on Instagram," which is like so great. It's good to come into any room through another door, I think.
And then I guess it also opened up that door where you've exhibited your Instagram pictures.
Yeah.
I just
so lots of people came to my show, but a few people bought things. But that was like really weird. The gallery was like, we've never had so many people come to a show. And they said, we've never gotten so much press. But they didn't sell that much. I was like, that's so weird. So it's just, I think the thing is, there's still, I mean, I think we guard our genres. It's sort of
Yes.
like, but do my photographs have value?
Right.
You know,
yeah.
because people buy art with two thoughts in mind. I like that, but they also think, will it hold its value? And I can't promise anybody that I'll hold my value, you know.
And I guess also it's a new idea that you could buy a picture that you've seen on Instagram. I mean, you could
Yes.
also print it at home, so why would you?
But you
It
can't.
might be that.
I don't think they can. Yeah, I think you can't print off Instagram, or it would. I don't think so. You need the original file.
I'm not on Instagram, so
Yeah.
you know better than me.
Oh.
Yeah. But I guess that's also maybe like a new idea that you could, put an Instagram picture on your wall. I
It's
don't know.
still like,
It's
if
like
a
this-
famous artist did it, it would be cool.
Yeah.
But I think when some weird poet does it, it's still like, interesting, fun to look at, but, it's.
I just want to go back a little bit to when you first came to New York City in the 70s on this pilgrimage to become a poet. For me, I really see you as like, a role model. It's your work I will read when I feel down or when I have doubts about writing. And I'm wondering, I'm guessing you also had a person like that when you first came to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about who that was or who those people were?
Well, one person there's a writer named Jill Johnston that, I don't know, I mean, she's a little bit unknown now, but she's kind of getting rediscovered. And she had a column in the Village Voice when the Village Voice was that paper. And
Right.
I can't tell you how many women, and probably men too, certainly queers, because that was like, I lived near Cambridge. And so I lived in a suburban town next to it, and so you'd take the bus to Harvard Square to hear music and do things and stuff, and there in the newsstand was the Village Voice, and it's like where you would get the world. And Jill Johnston had a column in the Village Voice, and it was like, oh my God. And she really had a totally interesting, her evolution was like, she was a dancer, and then like many dancers, she had an injury, and so she stopped dancing, so she became a dance critic. And then she but she was in the art world, so then she started to write about art too, but also did that thing that people often do. She would write about the party, like all the artists were at the party. So she was documenting a certain kind of artist social life, so it was very on the scene. And then she came out as a lesbian, so then she had a column about being a lesbian in the Village Voice, and we were all over America were like, oh my God. And so I can't tell you how many women I've met who came to New York to be Jill Johnston. Like we all wanted to be her, and she was also very influenced by Gertrude Stein, and wrote in this very stream of consciousness style, which was just incredible. And she wrote, her famous book was Lesbian Nation, which again is not a famous book anymore. But actually, I think a UK publisher just did a new, very cool looking edition of her. It's probably in this bookstore, and I think she died a few years ago. But she was really important to me.
When I read your work about those years, then I get this really strong sense of that there was a scene.
Yeah, just that word is really funny.
That's not in use that much anymore, right?
No, I remember when, and people older than me used it more than we used it, because I remember a guy who was from the 60s. I came to New York after Frank O'Hara died, but there was a guy who was a friend of his, and and he liked me, and I remember him being really enthusiastic about me or something, and he was like, did you meet Frankie? Meaning Frank O'Hara. I was like, he called him Frankie? And then he was like, when did you come on the scene? And it was so like of another moment, and I just was like, in the 70s, and but it was like they literally in the 60s, because I think it was that sense, it was like the Warhol thing. You were in the factory, you were on the scene, and it was like you were someplace and people were taking pictures, or you were on the set of a film. There was this excitement, like everybody's desire to be there at the place was like kind of like you were being, cast into, the future or eternity or something by being on this set of this film, And I think it's so interesting that technology changes. We don't think that way anymore because the set is everywhere. The set is my food. Here's a food pic. It's like it's a whole different reality. But and I think there was a sense that scene, it was coterie and it enclosed groups of people, and it was very important to get in the scene. And
I guess it also felt once you were in there quite supportive.
Then you'd survive, because I think the rich and the poor really socialized a lot when I was younger. And so there was, rich people kind of liked having cute poor people hanging around. You know, and poor people often had lofts. There was more real estate available. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't all kind of snapped up. So there were like bigger spaces that we socialized in, and there was more social mobility, as I saw it in my 20s. So it was a good opportunity to eat for free, to drink for free, you know, and so on.
And one of those places that was important for you was the St. Mark's.
Yeah, it still is. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I'm not sure if people know what that is.
Well, it's interesting. It's sort of like, it's very weird because it's like St. Mark's Church is a church, and it's like on the site of like maybe the oldest church in New York City, which was Peter Stuyvesant's church. So like it's on the Bowery, which means farm. People probably know it means farm and Dutch. But and so it's always been the immigrant church, the hippie church, the alternative. Like Isadora Duncan danced there, and W.H. Auden used to go to church there, and Patti Smith got discovered there, and Sam Shepard. So it's just had this kind of incredible lineage in American art, and I think part of it too was like in the quote Summer of Love, when all the hippies came to the East Village. I think the government was like, how are we going to control alienated youth in the East Village? So what they did was so people always wondered if it was CIA, but they gave money to NYU, who gave money to the priest at the church to start these art programs. And so they started a film program and a poetry program and a theater program, and you know, and all this art came out of those. So it was, even when I came to New York in the 70s, it was still free. So you didn't have to get an MFA, you didn't have to go to graduate school. You could just go with your beer can and study poetry with an amazing person, you know. And so it was just very kind of like, you use the habits that you had from high school of just hanging out, you know, to kind of into the art world. And it was very, I mean, I remember, you know, within a year I was at a party at Allen Ginsberg's house, and Robert Lowell was there, and I was like, oh my God, look where, but it was a little world, so it wasn't that hard to get in the room. There weren't people fighting to get in the room, you know.
And so that scene is now kind of online, but I do remember a couple of years ago you did the Afterglow book presentation at St. Mark's.
Yeah.
And you put dogs on the table. It was wonderful. Like there was a table with two dogs sitting on it, right, while people were reading.
Were there dogs on the table?
There were dogs, yes. Dogs in a dress. It was great. So yeah, I was there. So there were like different artists who had written dog literature.
Oh, because the dog book. They read the dog book
and
party.
like
Yes.
People narrating their voices. It was awesome.
Yeah. I was like, dog? I was at a different party. It's like, I was at that one too. But,
so those things they are still happening, even though the scene is kind of online now.
But it's like it's a home for a lot of us.
Yeah.
I think I think it's really the place still. It's kind of, it was, you know, years ago it was just considered the church of avant-garde American poetry, and it still has that connection. And actually the cool thing is, for a long time it was like, people kept handing the power. They were slow to hand the power to another generation, and now it really is like somebody, a guy named Kyle DeCoyan runs it, and he's quite young, and people were like, "Whoa, can we really give it to, you know," and stuff. And he's just changed the place utterly. It's like a whole, you know, it's like you can't imagine that a place would. I mean, it's like there's a connection to the past, but it really is new, and that's always about people. It's kind of amazing that it's so like if you put something in the hands of the right people, the inherent thing of the place changes, and he's done it, and it's awesome, you know.
So yeah, you've been on the scene for over 40 years. What developments in literature are you excited about right now? What currents? What?
God, I mean, I just think that this, you know, there's just always new books and new writers that I'm like kind of thrilled. I mean, I think it's sort of like there's more. I mean, obviously, it's sort of like it isn't so male dominated anymore.
Sure,
it's not like a white writing scene anymore. I mean, there's just like it's. I mean, I think it's sort of like it's a different. Poetry is very hot. You know, I mean, that's happened. Like in the 70s, poetry was hot, and then it was like, I mean, we were still writing poetry, but it wasn't fashionable. Which is like, who cares? If you love it, you do it. But it's like suddenly it's sort of in there in a whole different way, and that's exciting. You know, so I think literature is just like people regard it not so much as entertainment, but I think like something that is like a lifeblood thing in a way that it hadn't been for a couple of decades. I think.
Maybe it also has a little bit to do with the political moment.
I think,
That was
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I'm going to end off with a very cliche question. What are you working on right now? Because I know you
Um,
always have many different things going at the same time.
Yeah, well, I did. I mean, I wrote a pilot to a TV show, and it doesn't seem like anybody really wants it. So that's just. I'm hoping
They're
it's,
lost.
it's still, it's not dead in the water. But that I spent a year or two writing screenplays and writing that stuff. But now I'm working on a novel, and I want to write a really big ass book. I feel like enough of the David Foster Wallace, now scarred giant. I want to write a 1,000-page book, and and it has to do with relationships, but also my mother will be in there, and I think it's animals, as many animals as I can fit in.
Awesome. That's really exciting. That's
Yeah.
something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think it's called All My Loves. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
But not so gossipy. Yeah.
Eileen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking so many smart questions and reading my work. And yeah.
It was often awesome to have you. I really hope that you're going to be back at some point, because this was your first time in Brussels.
Yeah, and I'm very sad to only be here for under 24 really great hours.
Yeah, so you should definitely come back.
Yeah.
I want to thank everyone who's here tonight. I want to.
Did anybody want to ask? Do we want to ask?
Would you like? Are you?
Oh,
open to
we don't want to go
questions?
too long. But if anybody has a question from the audience,
Have you-
Are possible?
it could be the wrong energy because you were really wrapping
Okay,
up.
who has a question?
I just had it in my
Actually,
mind,
I'm
so
not
I was.
sure if I didn't. I wasn't sure if you wanted questions, but yeah, let's do it.
If you guys want to go to the bathroom and get a drink, or you think it's time, you feel free to.
Hi.
Hello.
I just have a question. Why Marfa? Because it's a really weird place.
Have you been there?
Yes.
You didn't like it? When did you go?
Well, I have this very boring profession. I'm an art curator, so I was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So sorry.
And that's good.
I write sometimes too. And so yes, I was there for art-related matters. So there is this weird French art school that's opened an antenna there because I'm French, obviously. I went to Ballroom, Marfa. I went to some socializing bars, restaurants, etc. Met this funny Adobe master who told me the story of Adobe in Marfa. I went to the Judd Foundation, all this.
You didn't like it at all?
I mean, I really liked it in a way, but I also really hated it in another place because it's a weird, concretion of different stories in relationship to the border, to the former Mexican presence, the railway, the mythology of the Deep West in America.
Right.
Very strong white presence after 9/11, with a lot of New Yorkers trying to find a place to flee in case New York would be destroyed by terrorists or something like this.
Yeah.
So a weird mix also between this very white male sculptoric
There's a dude
presence.
thing going on. There's definitely
Yeah.
a dude thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, so that's why I was wondering why
Yeah.
Marfa, among all these other rural places in America where you could probably go and hide, why there?
Yeah, I guess I went there. I always wanted to go there. I'd never gone there. I was like, Marfa, I want to go to Marfa, and I just went there for a residency for a month, and I just had this feeling that it was there were two things, the landscape. I really love the landscape, and it's I'm very East Coast, so it's the mountains and the bigness and the scale, and it has nothing to do with me. The landscape is very much not mine, and so I thought that would be good for writing. And then it's sort of there's enough going on there that I thought, I was single, and I thought I just would not go crazy here. I felt I want to be someplace where nobody cares if I go out or not, but if I want to go out, I can go out. And so it was sort of a mix of public and private in a way that, and I bought a house. And so I wanted to have a house someplace in the world, and I found a very cheap house there. And so it's really fun. And my dog is very happy there. So it kind of works for me, even though it's 11 hours door to door to get there from my apartment in New York. So that's sort of nuts.
Yeah,
But
probably Hudson was closer.
Hudson is really closer. That's true. Yes. No. This person here.
What is it? Yeah.
Sorry, if If you guys
Is there anything more I can tell you about the puppets?
that was my question.
Yeah. Only that I think the paper mache is really porous as a substance, and so I feel like it really holds stuff, and I feel like it holds emotional trauma from child. Like when I look, I don't know what it's like for anybody else, but when I look at those puppets, I just feel like they actually hold so much more of my family than I ever knew. Like who I was when I was 9 is like in those puppets. Like even my queer identity, like there was like, you know, and the women, the female puppet does not have a body. I was like, whoa, you know, I was really not wanting to be female, you know, and Montgomery was like the cool young guy, you know, like the boy I wanted to be when I was a child and stuff. So it's just like, but also they're very traditional because I took the class with a woman named Miss Ursula, who was, in fact, I think the German accent is coming from Miss Ursula, who was, you know, like the lady who taught, which was kind of amazing. It was like after World War II in the States, you know, and she was our puppet teacher, and she taught us about sort of European kids puppet theater. And I even just recently read like the crocodile is a character in this puppet theater. The ghost Casper is a figure. You know, like I thought I was being original, but I just forgot that I was just absorbing this stuff. And the one detail that I keep forgetting to tell people is the crocodile's singing voice is John Ashbery. And John was, I mean, I knew John, but he was very close to a friend of mine. And so John was just like being silly at home one night and singing Old Man River. And my friend Adam recorded him. And so when John died, he sent it to me, and it was very sweet. And I know that his partner is very controlling of John's estate, so there's no way in the world I could put on the credits that the voice of John Ashbery is the crocodile. But that's John singing, which was really fun. No. A finale? We could have a Buddhist finale, and that's no question. Hey. Oh, here it, yes.
Thank you for the wonderful reading,
Oh.
the performance. And maybe if you can say something about actually the connection between the voice and writing.
Between the what?
The voice and writing, like the performance, did that always come hand in hand for you when you were beginning to write poetry? How to get there to that stage of performing it?
A little bit, because I think before I ever published, I did readings. You know, it's sort of like when I came to New York, the open mic was the way to share your work, and I didn't know how to publish, and I had sent, you know, stupidly to places like the New Yorker, and, you know, like, I guess I didn't know about poetry magazines and stuff, and so then I first accessed, and I think I always wanted to, I mean, you know, like when I was younger, I thought about being a DJ. I liked using my voice, like even in grade school when you would like, if you were a good reader, you were sort of screwed. Like I went to Catholic school and it was like, you know, you'd stand up and read something out loud, but if you were a good reader, you just sit down in like 2 seconds, and the kids who were bad readers would be up there for hours, you know? Like I would even pretend to be a bad reader just to stand up longer, and the nun was like, stop that, you know, just sit down, you know? And so I think I always wanted to use my voice in some way, and I think, so I think poetry, and I think it's been just really interesting to like, because poetry reading styles are very received, you know, it's sort of like there's a, you know, the night was impossible, and the dog ran. You know, there's a very deliberate poetry style that we're all like, oh, poetry voice. And then there was one in the 70s that was the kind of a Patti Smith, you know, it was like, in the night was incredible, you know, and it was, so there's all these different ways. But I think when I first started writing, I felt like I was so unsure about whether I was allowed to be a poet. And so I thought if I just read my poems like me, then nobody would mind or think I was being pretentious or something, you know, and so I think I was always a little attached to using my own, to not put a spin on the poem, but to try and read them as me, and I think slowly I've given myself permission to use my body, because again, there are a lot of rules about like, if you use your body, then you're being like a performance artist, you're being a, you know, shticky, or it's corny, or it's, but when I talk, I use my hands, and so it took me a long time to think, fuck, if I want to, you know, gesticulate while I'm reading the poem. It's like, it is my mind, it is my text, it is my, you know, I do have a physical connection to the sound of it. And even talking to people who are involved in music theory, and it's been really interesting to me lately. Like I worked around musicians or not, I worked in a bar that had a jazz room when I first came to New York. I was like, but I would watch these guys be like at the bass, the stand-up bass, and they would be like, making those faces, and then the piano player was growling, and there's this whole, and I think in music school they call it embouchure, or...
Embouchure? Embouchure? But there are people who are... How?
Yes, and I think it means literally how you put your mouth to the instrument. But I think it's come to mean the whole category of the things that one does in relationship to sound. And I think as a writer, it's just like there are things that the sound is really in all these different parts of my body, I think. And when I give myself permission to be ugly, make faces, use my hands, I think I'm better at getting the sound and the rhythm out. And even giving myself permission to stop. It's often in a poem, I'll know that there's silence in the poem. And I think for a long time I felt like, that's so pretentious of me. I can't and now I think, no, give it all the sound that it's got. So I think performance has been evolving for me. And I think even now, my favorite thing in the world is audiobooks are so much fun. It's there's nothing like going into the studio for 3 days and recording a novel or a memoir or a book of poetry. And it's kind of incredible. And I think it's interesting when you meet people and they're like, oh, often it's visual artists, and they were like, oh, I was painting Chelsea Girls today. It was really great, and or people drive and they listen to your work. And it's like making films, except that they're the visual and you're just the soundtrack, and I love that.
Can I say one thing? But it's only one thing. For the people who like to listen to you, I really liked you on public access poetry, and the poem Anarchist. I don't know if you remember, but
vaguely.
No, but if you talk about making things while listening to you, I think everybody should listen to that. It's really funny and good. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for the recommendation. Yeah.
Oh.
Thanks for that comment. So I think we'll end it here.
Yes.
If that's okay. No, but
Ciao.
I mean, there will be drinks and books to buy.
Yes.
So please stay. And thank you, Soma, for questions. And thank you, Eileen.
Yes. Thank you.